Well, I'm here to talk about Oldboy, which is the middle panel, as it were, of Park Chan-wook's revenge trilogy. So I think we might start with Park Chan-wook himself. Let's get the name clear first. It is Park Chan-wook. The W is not pronounced. It's one of those quirks of Western orthography. It's how the Korean is transcribed into a Western alphabet, but the W anyway is not sounded, so it's Park Chan-wook correctly. He was born in 1963 into a very comfortable middle-class family. Father was a university professor, all the advantages, all the privileges, highly cultured household. His brother, Park Chan-gyung, became an artist and makes arty documentaries and essay films as well now. Probably not very familiar to Western viewers, but he's also quite active as a kind of filmmaker, not in the commercial arena. So he had this nice background, went to study aesthetics at university, Seogang University, which is not one of the best probably in Seoul, but still a big one. By all accounts, felt dissatisfied with the analytic thrust of the course, and so found his attention drifting towards first photography and subsequently film. And at a university film club where they watched everything on videotape, because we're talking about the 1980s here, and in the 1980s there was no such thing as easy access to foreign cinema in Korea. Korea at the time was still a military dictatorship and was still subject to extremely heavy censorship, and there was no easy access to either film classics or, in fact, anything on film in cinemas other than Korean commercial films and some imported Hollywood and Hong Kong films. I first went to Korea around that time in the late 80s, and I can remember being rather shocked at the dearth of what was available in cinemas in the city at that time. There were, I think, some embassy screenings of maybe imported films, but you had to go to the embassy to see them, and they probably weren't going to be translated into Korean. So it was, it assumed that you would speak English if they were non-English language speaking films. So you'd have English subtitles. Or if they were English language speaking, then there'd be no subtitles. So your English would have to be good enough to figure it out. There were, however, quite a number of Hollywood classics released on video. Whether the rights had been paid or not is a moot question. And Park Chan-wook famously became obsessed with cinema after going to films in a videotape festival in his university of Alfred Hitchcock films. And he became particularly obsessed with Vertigo, which he saw repeatedly on this videotape with Korean subtitles, and decided this was the job for him. He wanted to be a filmmaker. He first became a film critic and started publishing in the university magazines and then in some larger magazines, film criticism, initially about the films he loved, which at that point meant Hitchcock primarily. He drifted into a larger appreciation of some art films, or what we would think of as art films, again seen on videotape, but then found in the 90s his attention was shifting to what he called B-movies. It's not what you and I would call B-movies, because they were, what he meant was those Hollywood films by directors like Robert Aldrich or Sam Peckinpah, Sam Fuller, people like this, who made not B-movies in the sense of movies intended for the bottom half of a double bill, but B-movies in the sense that they were somewhat off mainstream in their point of view. They were darker, they were more dirty, they were more provocative, more challenging, more interested in not comfortable ways of life and ways of thinking, ways of behaving, deviant personalities, and so on and so on, all of which had obviously seminal influence on Park Chan-wook himself. He managed to make a film, a first feature, in 1992. This is before the political change in Korea. Democracy comes to South Korea only in 1993, and of the new directors who began before that change, nearly all of them were associated strongly with the protest movement, the military dictatorship movement. So Jang Sun-woo made a couple of films, in fact, before the change. Park Kwang-soo made a couple of films before the change. These were filmmakers who struggled against censorship and tried to put across political messages in their work, not terribly successfully in most cases, because the films were censored, but nonetheless the impulse was what was visible, and if people saw the films, then I think they would have kind of got the stance of the filmmakers. Park Chan-wook didn't do that. In 1992, he made a film called The Moon is the Sun's Dream, which has no political content of any kind at all, so it would be impossible to discern from the film what his own political stance might be. He wrote a script for a film called The Anarchists, which was taken away from him by the company and given to somebody else, so the film was made with his script, or a version of his script, but not directed by him. And he got to make his third feature only in the year 2000. This was a breakthrough for him. It was a film called JSA, or Joint Security Area, it's what it stands for. It's about secret fraternization between North Korean and South Korean border guards in the demilitarized zone on the border between the two halves of Korea. He referred to it himself several times jokingly as a gay film or queer film, because it is very homosocial. It implies that these young men on both sides of the border have a lot in common with each other and can get along terribly cozily and friendlily until something might go, an accident might disrupt everything and things might go wrong. But that is the central premise of the film, and it was an enormous hit. He himself has dismissed it, rather, in retrospect, as being a film that had no particular meaning for him. He made it because he felt the need, after two flop features, to make a hit. He needed, if he was going to have a career as a filmmaker in the Korean film industry, he needed to have a success to his name. So he contrived this film, it's an original script, deliberately as a vehicle for commercial success, and he carried it off. It did well. The film was one of the first Korean features to talk seriously about the possibility of fraternization between North and South. It went to some trouble to get North Korean accents correct and to get uniforms correct, all the details correct. So it had a certain underlying credibility, and people took it seriously. And I think it matched a widespread view in South Korea that some kind of reunification, at least at the human level, if not the political level, was a very desirable thing. Anyway, he got it right. This set him on track for a career in the commercial film industry in the way that the first two features had not. He responded to this by making, in the year 2002, 2 years after JSA, the first of his so-called revenge trilogy. That is Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, a film that was extremely well received critically in Korea. People were very impressed by it, but it meant nothing commercially. The audiences stayed away in large numbers from this film, despite the star power of the cast. It had Song Kang-ho as the industrialist whose daughter is kidnapped. It had Shin Ha-gyun as a deaf mute who allies himself with, he's trying to get a spare organ for his dying sister who has kidney disease, is tricked by the organ traffickers and desperately gets into this kidnap plot, aided by girlfriend Bae Do-na, star of Korea's Air Doll and Bong Joon-ho's Barking Dogs Never Bite and many other films besides. He gets into the kidnapping plot in order to try and retrieve the money that he's lost and to find a way to support his sister, having been tricked. So these are all big stars. Even by that time, they were quite well known and quite big in the Korean box office, but that didn't save the film commercially. He nonetheless followed it by making Oldboy the following year. The film was shot in 2003. It was premiered towards the end of 2003 in Korea. It was subsequently invited to. It did quite well. It did better than Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. It did well critically and commercially. Did okay. It was his first big hit, you can say, since JSA. In the spring of 2004, the film is invited to Cannes. And he's extremely lucky because the jury that year in Cannes is headed by none other than Quentin Tarantino, who makes absolutely sure that the film gets a major prize. He gets the Grand Prix, in fact, which is not the top prize in Cannes, but the second prize. And it's given basically to the best director. And in the wake of that, A, the film is sold widely around the world and becomes a cult success everywhere. B, the film is re-released in Korea with an advertising campaign based on its success in Cannes, and does quite well second time around in Korea as well, having done not badly the first time. So he's set up for commercial success. He becomes a big name. He's one of the major figures in South Korean cinema thanks to this success. He follows it with a third part of this trilogy, this loose trilogy of vengeance films, vengeance stories, revenge stories, which is released in 2005, I think, as Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, subsequently sold around the world as just Lady Vengeance, I think, which is yet another revenge story, but much less successful both in Korea and overseas. People like it less. I think the fact that it has venomous anti-lesbian stereotyping in it definitely didn't help. It has women's prison scenes towards the beginning, which are dominated by its grotesque, massive, fat lesbian who terrorizes all around her. I think it was that he finally apologized for when he made The Handmaiden some years afterwards. But I don't think he thought about it at the time. I don't think he was concerned about negative stereotypes in the slightest, in fact, at the time that he made the film. Anyway, this rounded off the trilogy and has led to various collections of the three films being bracketed together. All of them are tales, we should note perhaps, of thwarted revenge. They're all about characters who want, for one reason or another, revenge, but it goes wrong in all three cases. Things are not quite as clear-cut as they seem. It's not like a Peckinpah Western where the characters have a clear moral purpose and go searching for the people who oppressed them, and even if they die in the attempt, they will take revenge on some slight from the past. In this case, things are more complicated, more morally dubious, and usually the revenge quest is in some way compromised towards the end of the storyline. That is certainly the case in Oldboy, but it's also the case in the other two films. I think he needed some kind of change from this afterwards, perhaps because he followed the trilogy with a short film called Cut. It's made for a Hong Kong anthology called Three Extremes. I thought one of the most odious pieces of film ever released to the public. I thought it was deeply self-hating, audience-hating, cinema-hating even, because it's about a film director who clearly represents Park Chan-wook himself in some way, who comes home to find himself terrorized by a fan and his wife tortured by the fan, and it all works out very badly, but it seemed to be a work of profound self-hatred and a work of audience hatred and perhaps even cinema hatred. He rallied from it by making a comedy, his first comedy, a film called I'm a Cyborg, But That's Okay, which had big stars in it, big Korean stars in it, but didn't please the Korean public and didn't please international public very much either. After that, things get a bit more checkered. He made a vampire film called Thirst, which, so-so business. And then his American debut, his first English language film, Stoker, with Nicole Kidman and others, made in, I think, 2013, which was the same year that Spike Lee did his remake of Oldboy in America. But he retrieved the situation with Handmaiden, his first really big hit since Oldboy, in 2016, which was his apology for making anti-lesbian stereotyping before by doing a pro-lesbian film based, of course, on Sarah Waters' novel. Since then, he's tarnished the reputation again a little bit by doing Little Drummer Girl for television and not having anything like the impact of The Night Manager before it. So it's an up and down checkered career. I haven't mentioned various short films. I haven't mentioned various advertising films that he's lent his name to. But anyway, it's been he's had enough successes to define himself as a major Korean director of his generation. He's obviously drawn to the theme of revenge. He obviously has mixed feelings about it, feels the need to nuance it and to take away the clear-cut notion of revenge that you might find in what he called B movies, the American cinema of the 50s and 60s that he thought was so impressive. But I don't think you could amplify that into a worldview exactly. This is not a director with a very clear set of themes or even a clear set of styles that he could apply from film to film. There's more a kind of a clear desire to shock, a clear desire to have impact at a sort of MTV level, lots of stylistic flash, lots of stuff you wouldn't really find in Hollywood films, but a desire to apply a Wong Kar-wai type of stylistic overlay onto what is basically generic material, to give it a certain impact and oomph that would be impressive to audiences. And he happened upon a Japanese manga translated into Korean. It's since been translated into English as well and published in America. It's also called Oldboy. It was written by a writer called Tsuchiya Garon. It was illustrated by Minagishi Nobuaki. It appeared in 1996 through 1998, I think, in weekly installments, or nearly weekly installments, in a magazine called Weekly Manga Action in Japan. And it was subsequently collected by the publisher Futabasha in 8 volumes. Of 8 paperback volumes, and it was the 8 paperback volumes that were later translated into English in America and published in America, I think by Dark Horse, if I remember right. The manga is more simple than the film. The premise is the same. A man is plucked from his ordinary everyday life, finds himself imprisoned. In the manga, it's for only 10 years. And he has no idea why he's been locked up, why he's being imprisoned, or who's doing it. He finally is, to his surprise and bafflement, released, and he eventually discovers that it was an old classmate, a university or high school classmate actually, who was behind this and who was getting punishment, was getting his kind of revenge for a perceived slight, something that damaged the man's self-confidence and self-identity, sense of identity back in school days. That means, I suppose small spoiler alert here, Park Chan-wook's film hinges upon an incest motif, which is quite elaborate and quite complicated in its development. That's completely his addition to the material. There's none of that at all in the manga. So he transformed it. He doesn't emphasize the manga when he talks about the film, and it's as if he thinks he took over the idea from the manga, but it is rooted in the manga, which does have the same central premise. Park Chan-wook, though, expanded it for some reason to 15 years of imprisonment without explanation, and introduced motifs of hypnotism, of gassing, of secret visits during the years of imprisonment to affect the prisoner, to do things to him, not only just cut his hair, but also do implant other ideas. So hypnotism plays a part in that as well. As far as I remember, none of that appears in the manga either. I think this is all Park Chan-wook's additions to the material. So he hits upon 2 prominent actors, both of whom have to undergo extensive training, physical training, before making the film. One is the theatre actor Chae-min-sik, who had recently done a film for Imkwon-taek called Chihwasun. It's also known as Drunk on Women and Poetry, and had played in Cannes under that title, I think. Chae-min-sik is a very impressive actor, I think. He is a theatre-trained actor and is capable of immersing himself in a role in a very committed way, in the way that we associate with someone like Tom Hardy, I guess, in British cinema, British and American cinema. He's willing to gain weight, lose weight, and so on. And in this film, he does have to both. We see him at the beginning of the film as a chubby drunk in a police station, behaving very badly, with lots of jump cuts through his desire to be uncontrollable by the police who've arrested him for being drunk and disorderly. His friend tries to bail him out, but then suddenly, to his great amazement, he disappears. The friend's great amazement, that is. And he wakes up to find himself in this mysterious prison where he will spend the next 15 years with only a TV set for company and a fake window with a fake view beyond it, so nothing to look at except the TV. Through the TV, he learns after 1 year of imprisonment that his wife has been murdered and that he is the prime suspect. So not only is he locked up, not only has he been deprived of his wife and daughter, but he is wanted for murder. So Chae-min-sik, yes, as we were saying, willing to gain weight, lose weight, immerse himself totally in the needs of the production and the needs of the character. At the beginning of the film, he is a chubby, overweight, he's a travel agent actually, although it's not much emphasized. He works in a travel agency. So it's assumed that he has traveled a bit, is familiar with the notion of long-haul flight, let's say. And he's visibly overweight. In fact, he takes his top off in the police station, so you see him brawling, you see his physique there. When he's locked up, when he's imprisoned, he has nothing to do, of course, all day for 15 years. So he shadow boxes. He starts punching the wall, starts trying to get himself into some kind of physical shape, and dramatically loses weight. This, of course, happened in real life. If you look at the extras on the Korean disc of the film, there is a quite lengthy documentary of Chae-min-sik in boxing gyms, where he did have to learn how to box, because there is a scene early on in his revenge quest when he discovers the location of the prison where he's been locked up for 15 years, and a large group of ominous-looking thugs confront him, and armed with a hammer, he has a go at them all, and in fact wins. Done in one extended take. It's one of the more spectacular visual strategies in the film, and one of the things that made the film famous, in fact, was that very long take of him cutting a swathe through something like 20 bad guys, variously armed, all looking like Sin, all of them very macho and heavy, but he, in his new slimmed down form, is able to take them on and to, probably by sheer dint of will, defeat them all. The question he keeps asking, why am I being locked up? When he finally meets his antagonist, the man who was behind it all, who has this godlike role, playing God with the other characters, he's told that was the wrong question to ask. It's not why was I locked up, why was I released when I was? That's the question to ask. That's the key to understanding what is happening. And he never does, or finally, the bad guy has to show him. I mean, presents him with a photo album explaining the truth of what's been going on. And he's, of course, devastated by it when he discovers it. I'm not giving it away here. But this is the moment of revelation that actually forces him to crack him, and it reduces him to rubble in a way, and opens the way for the film's highly ambiguous ending. The film has a very non-explicit ending. Again, no spoilers, I'm not telling you what it is, but the story does not resolve in a conventional, generic way. It leaves all kinds of questions open. It leaves certainly the possibility that he's still under hypnosis in the closing scenes of the film and is imagining these things in some way. That's very possible. So the ending is up for audience interpretation. Park Chan-wook is not imposing an ending on the audience. He's inviting you to think about it and think what makes most sense to you when you watch the film. So it's not a clear-cut melodramatic ending, although it is preceded by a very clear-cut melodramatic showdown between the supposed good guy and the supposed bad guy. The supposed bad guy is played by an actor called Yu Ji-tae, who is not, I think, from theatre, but from film. He's also a sometime director. He's made a couple of short films which are quite ambitious and quite interesting. He's a smart guy, I think, very, very intelligent. He also had to get into major training for his role in this film, not so much because he has big fight scenes. On the contrary, he has a tough, macho lieutenant who does the fighting for him. But he does have to appear naked briefly, so he needs to show a presentable figure. And he also has to take phone calls while doing rather elaborate yoga poses and stuff. So I think he does need to be fit for those things. You see him again in there is documentary footage of him training for the role, and mostly it is indeed yoga and gym work to do with sit-ups, press-ups, this kind of thing, under strict personal supervision by a personal trainer. So they all went through some hardships. The girl in the film, who I think is a new talent in the film, also had to undergo training as a sushi chef, because she's first seen working in a Japanese restaurant in the film. That's where she meets Odesu, the man who's been locked up and has just finally been released. And she, in fact, gives him a place to stay. So, and they later become lovers, and she's a major figure in his life, let's say. All of these currents in the film are, I think, well sketched, but not in very traditional generic terms. Now, already we've mentioned the fact that Park Chan-wook's shtick is that he takes basically generic material, albeit usually with a rather dark twist, because that's what he's drawn to. As I said, he likes the Robert Aldrich, Sam Peckinpah kind of angle of approach, and he assumes the worst about people on the whole. But he takes a generic, a more or less generic story, in this case from a manga, a Japanese manga, and he overlays it with a certain kind of modernist style. He will come up with ideas to make a scene visually interesting, like a disguised wipe, or a clock that fills the screen and then wipes away to reveal something else behind it, which don't have any particularly profound meaning, but which are glossy enough and flashy and fresh enough to have some impact, to make you think, wow, this is something, this is something. That coupled with the extremeness of the action, the fact that, when Odesu, played by Jae Min-sik, finally does get out of his prison after 15 years, he stumbles into a Japanese restaurant, orders something. He says he wants something living and is offered a live octopus. There is a live octopus dish in Korean restaurants, or in Korean seafood restaurants. It's called sannakji. I've had it. It consists of the octopus tentacles, which have been cut up into quite small pieces, and put into a bowl, and you pick them up. They are still wriggling because the nerves of an octopus continue living for quite a bit of time after it's been cut up into pieces. And you dip them into hot chili paste and you eat them. And the suckers will still try to cling to the inside of your mouth or your tongue, which gives you a very strange feeling. But you're supposed to chew and eat. I don't recommend this particularly. It's certainly not one of my favorites, but anyway, if you go to Korea, go to a seafood restaurant, you will be treated to this. That's not what happens in the film. When his request for something alive is brought to him, it is an octopus, and he bites into the business end of the octopus when he's clearly still alive. Jae Min-sik had to do 4 takes of this scene, so the tentacles are all dribbling down his front and wrapping themselves around his neck and so on. So the thing is very clearly still alive at the time, but he manfully goes for it and chews and chews and chews. Jae Min-sik apparently said Buddhist prayers for each octopus before he consumed it in this way. Park Chan-wook rather frivolously said that he cared more about the octopus than he did about the actor having to do this, although he'd written the scene. It is, again, it's one of the scenes that made the film notorious internationally. People had never seen anything quite like this, an obviously real octopus being chewed. bitten into by the actor. Whether you think this is revelatory of character, whether it says anything about the situation of being released from 15-year captivity or not, is probably related to what you think of Park Chan-wook as a director. But anyhow, it's one of the scenes, one of the inventions in the film that absolutely made his reputation and made the film's reputation and made the film sensational. In fact, it was so sensational that there have been no less than 2 remakes. One, only a couple of years after the original film, or 3 years perhaps after the original film was made, is an unauthorized remake in India. There's a Hindi version called Zinda. It's by Sanjay Gupta, and nobody told the Koreans that they were doing this, and the Koreans were not best pleased when they found out that there was an unauthorized remake in Hindi, and started to take legal action to stop it. There was an authorized remake in 2013, as we noted already, by Spike Lee, which has the same title and more or less the same plot. However, interestingly, it was first optioned by Steven Spielberg some years earlier. And Spielberg spent about 2 years working with a writer trying to get a script for an American version of the film. What Spielberg was attracted to is hard to imagine. I don't suppose it was the live octopus chewing. It might not have been the long single take of taking out 20 thugs with a hammer either. Maybe it was the 15 years imprisonment, who knows what it was. But anyway, something attracted the attention of Steven Spielberg, but something also made him give up, or he couldn't get a script that he liked out of it, so he abandoned it. And it's only at that point that Spike Lee comes in and working with different writers and comes up with the idea of the American remake. So the film had this kind of impact. The film was impressive to the world. The fact that Quentin Tarantino was backing it was obviously a big plus. It definitely helped. And I think it's arguable that had the film not played in Cannes in the spring of 2004, that it would have, I won't say passed unnoticed, but it would have remained a small-scale cult item, I think, available only to connoisseurs of Korean cinema and you know, dark or so-called extreme Asian cinema. I don't know if some people will remember that at that time in Britain there was a label, a DVD, initially a video label, later a DVD label, called Tartan. And Tartan launched a sub-label called Extreme Asia, which specialized exactly in films like Oldboy, anything from Hong Kong or Korea or Japan that was quite outre or went further than you would expect things to go in their Western versions. All of these things were grouped together in a rather random way by a label like Tartan and marketed as something outre, something beyond the norm, something that would be disgusting or shocking or startling or uncomfortable or daringly extreme in some way. Oldboy fitted that pattern to a T, as in fact does most of Park Chan-wook's work. So you could say that the Asia Extreme label was made for a director like Park Chan-wook. He's been trying to, I think, reinvent himself as something a little bit more refined, a little bit less out there in his recent work, like Handmaiden and, of course, Little Drummer Girl. Remains to be seen how far this takes him. We'll have to, leave the door open on the future of a potentially interesting career. Nonetheless, there's no question that Oldboy played a significant part in the early 2000s in establishing Korean cinema as a major force around the world. And I think it's fair to say, in most respects, Oldboy is not only his most successful international film, at least until Handmaiden came along, but also probably his best.